1963 began a year that would broadcast on CBS a television show which to this day is still gaining fans on DVD and when people watch it on Sci-Fi Channel, and I'm talking about the Twilight Zone. The 60s were a great year for television in a lot of ways. Example, in the 60s, you had TV shows that, really crummy TV shows that were ending, like Leave It to Beaver, and so on. But in the 60s, you had television shows like Bonanza and Gunsmoke, which lasted until the that lasted from the, and even Bonanza lasted into the 80s. I mean, that's how popular it was. Gunsmoke lasted about 78, 77 before it went off the air. But point being, the 60s were a great decade for television. Ed Sullivan Show, Steve Allen Show. But the Twilight Zone is such a, not even nostalgic, but it's interesting. It was ahead of its time, and Rod Serling was Stephen King before Stephen King. Rod Serling beat Stephen King at his game before Stephen King ever thought of becoming a horror writer. There's 2 episodes of The Twilight Zone, though, that are my favorites. One is the most scariest I've ever seen my whole life, and still affects me to this day. And one is the most heartfelt one I've ever seen, and it's one of my favorites for that sole reason. And the heartfelt one I'm talking about is Night of the Meek. It stars... I should say the star of its show is a homeless man who's playing the mall Santa Claus, and he does it every year. It's the only thing he looks up to every year, considering that he can't get a job any time else during the year. But here's the problem, though. He's an alcoholic. And Rod Serling wrote this. He didn't write all the Twilight Zone episodes. Some other people wrote them because he gave new writers, especially people that want to write suspense, thrillers, horror, he gave them a chance to shine when the Twilight Zone was on TV. But he wrote a lot of the Twilight Zone episodes, and especially Night of the Meek he wrote, because Rod Serling was an alcoholic for about 5 years. He understands what alcoholism is and why people drink and why people are alcoholics. And Art Carney plays the lead character, and he delivers such a brilliant role that it's just beautiful how he does it. And he delivers the role so believable, you don't even see Art Carney, you just see the homeless man being fired from playing the mall Santa Claus, and you feel sorry for him. And throughout the whole episode is a real heartstring episode of The Twilight Zone. It's not even trying to scare you, but it's just trying to make you feel empathetic and sympathetic for the guy, because he's a civilian of a past time, and when he was younger he held a job, he had a home, he had family, but now since he's older, he doesn't have a family, he doesn't have a job, he lives in the streets, he lives in a shelter, not the streets. But where he lives, there's starving kids, and kids who can't go to school because they're homeless, who can't eat, who don't have any new clothing except for the ones on their back. And it's just a very heartstring, it's an episode that pulls at your heartstrings, because you feel so empathetic and sympathetic towards this guy that that you're calling the boss of this store an asshole for firing him for drinking. And he explains to the guy why he drinks. And he says, I could drink, I could sweep, or I could drink, and drinking's more subtle. That's a brilliant line. And Rod Serling wrote that because he knows what alcoholism is. When you're an alcoholic, you can either sob at a particular situation, or you could drink at it and make it more subtle to deal with. And it's a very brilliantly written episode. It's a very heartfelt episode. It's not like the Twilight Zone film that I'm going to talk about next, which is completely terrifying. And that episode is The New Exhibit. I've seen this episode when I was about 12, 11 years old. One time during the Twilight Zone marathon during New Year's Eve, exactly, at 10:30 p.m. And this is when the Twilight Zone got into like its 5th and final 6th season. The shows were varied from half hours to hour-long episodes, and this is an hour-long episode. And this is very creepy, this story. It's about a man who was a tour guide at a wax museum for years. It's like a Route 66 type of wax show, wax museum. It's small, but it has historical wax figures where there's history behind the person that it's about. And this guy particularly did the tour guide on Murder's Row, of all the most sickening and sadistic serial killers of all time. And this guy, on this day, it's his final day on the job, and he decides to take these wax figures home. And they're lifelike. They actually look like these serial killers as they're depicted in pictures, except for Jack the Ripper. Nobody knows exactly how the guy looked like, except they made a very creepy Jack the Ripper for this episode. And so he takes it home, and just weird shit happens. His wife is killed. You see Jack the Ripper murdering his wife, but did Jack the Ripper murder his wife, or did our lead character murder his wife? It's a very suspenseful and scary episode, and it still affects me to this day, and this is why I don't like wax figures, because that episode just made me think that wax figures are alive, and that whoever it's about resembling them will come and get you if you take the wax figure home. And this is why this episode frightens me, still to this day. Nevertheless, The Twilight Zone is still a great television show, still suspenseful, and like I said, some of them are just still heartfelt, and that shows empathy and sympathy towards people who have less than you, but yet they're trying to make their way in life, but yet people keep turning them down because they're homeless or they don't have a job, starving kids. I mean, some of the episodes are just still heartfelt and make you think about other people and not just yourself. And some of them are just too terrifying that they actually stop you from getting sleep. So I'm going to link the 2 episodes, The Night of the Meek and The New Exhibit, in the comment section, well, in the description box below, and watch them. Watch The Night of the Meek first, because like I said, it's a true heartfelt episode, and it's a brilliantly acted. It's brilliantly acted out by Art Carney. But watch The New Exhibit at midnight and try to sleep after watching it. See ya, guys.